So tonight we're going to look at emotional vulnerability. When and how do I express this wisely? Just want to start with a story. And this is actually a true story, but the names have been changed. And so, let's call this couple John and Jane. So John and Jane are Christians. They met in church and they got married at a young age. They were in their mid-20s when they got married. And they each had well-paying full-time jobs. And they bought a house together. In church, they served together as well, and they always looked peaceful and happy whenever people saw them. In fact, they said they never argued, and they always got along. And so this indeed looked like the perfect couple. However, 7 years later, John and Jane are divorced. What happened there? So John and Jane outwardly looked like the perfect couple, beautifully suited to each other, caring and considerate of one another. They love God. But what actually happened in private was that they were never vulnerable with each other. They were polite with each other, and they didn't like conflict. So when difficult feelings came up, when there was tension, they both pretended, everything's okay, I'm okay, and they hid their true feelings from one another. So this pattern of conflict avoidance and keeping their relationship at a safe but superficial level to keep themselves safe led to disconnection and resentfulness, and hence the deceiving conclusion that they weren't right for each other, leading to divorce. And that was really sad. But their story is not uncommon. What was missing in John and Jane's marriage? On the most part, amongst a complexity of other issues, of course, we're not going to simplify it down to one thing, but there was a lack of emotional vulnerability in the most part. And no doubt it was learnt from their childhoods. You can't have authenticity, depth or connection without taking emotional risks. The good thing is you can grow in this capacity for risk should you choose to. So I'll circle back to this later. So firstly, what is emotional vulnerability? Jesus modeled vulnerability for us. The word shows us that Jesus made himself vulnerable to us as human beings, not only emotionally, but in all area of his life, his entire life. He made himself vulnerable to us human beings. Philippians 2 verses 5 to 8 says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So Jesus humbled himself as a human being. He laid aside his God privileges in heaven, coming to earth as a human being, voluntarily surrendering his power. He made himself vulnerable to human pain, suffering, and man's sin and hostility towards him. Yet he remained sinless. He voluntarily chose to expose himself to take on the risks of human hurt, pain, and suffering. Indeed, he took on only what he could, our pain and our sin. So Jesus embodied vulnerability, and his example calls us to do so as well. Vulnerability is a form of humility, as Jesus has shown us. There's also a secular and popular definition. If you've heard of Brené Brown, she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, that unstable feeling we get when we step out of our comfort zone or do something that forces us to loosen control. So emotional vulnerability, we could say in a nutshell, is humility while risking uncertainty and exposing us emotionally to discomfort and to letting go of control. And so I just want to be very, very clear. First of all, the vulnerability we're talking about here is not this. It's not making yourself susceptible to harm, to be abused, to being taken advantage of, to be a doormat, or to be mistreated. And it's not subjugating yourself to another person. So back to emotional vulnerability. Most of us aren't like this naturally, right? We often do the opposite. We naturally want to protect ourselves from feeling vulnerable. We naturally put up our protective walls. Our defense system is on auto, maybe fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It goes on high alert. And especially so because if we've been wounded in the past, if we've encountered many hurts and pains and things that were threatening or dangerous. So, but the thing is, today, when we put up walls of protection to stay safe, it can look like these kind of things that we're doing today since childhood. Like, for example, people-pleasing. People-pleasing traits, never saying no directly and overly apologizing. Could look like the other end of the spectrum. A need to control others and externals. You need everything to be perfect. You set up unrealistic or rigid standards for yourself or for others. You can be very guarded in your posture and language, and perhaps you measure all your words and you filter them all before saying something for fear of, backlash or criticism or whatever. Your conversations are about things, work, tasks, instead of your own inner thoughts and feelings. You talk about yourself or others in a general sense instead of being quite specific. Or you just hide your emotions by trying to be very logical or rational in your speech and your behavior. And also there's the other extreme. We can overtalk or overshare. This is also a protection mechanism, perhaps to stay in control or to gain validation, to avoid feeling maybe rejected or disliked. So the result is people might never, if you have all these protection strategies up, the result is that people may never get to know the real you because you always want to present only a selective, acceptable part of you and that you feel is safe to be seen or heard. And then on the other hand, you won't get to know others very deeply either, because people mirror us, right? So you might feel disconnected. So if you're very guarded, the other person might also feel very guarded, like, oh, I don't feel comfortable sharing anymore because that person is quite guarded. So you might feel distanced or disconnected, lonely, even when there's a lot of people around you. And you might feel then that you don't quite fit in anywhere. You might feel left out. But this only makes our isolation worse, right? So here is the key to emotional vulnerability. Before you get comfortable with being vulnerable with others, you need to be comfortable with your own uncomfortable feelings. It starts with you, in you. If you can't do this for yourself, you'll find it difficult to express this to others, or you will want others to process everything for you and with you. So what we need to do is make a choice for ourselves and decide, I need to do the inner work. Sanctification, which is a lifelong process. So in general, learn how to regulate your emotions, acknowledge and process difficult feelings, notice what your protective and coping patterns are, examine and replace your core beliefs, unlearn old habits, relearn new ones. So this inner work that you do makes for healthy vulnerability. So it starts within yourself. And a really good place to start is by listening. So listening, not talking. It's about listening to my own mind, body, and spirit. Listening to our own mind, body, and spirit. So each of those parts of us speaks to us on a daily basis. Do we recognize their voices when they're speaking, trying to get our attention? Do you listen with curiosity and pay attention without judgment? For example, what is the self-talk going on in my mind? What are my emotions telling me right now? What are they? Can I name them? What's that pain in my back telling me? What's God saying to me? So by practicing God awareness and self-awareness, you'll be more others aware. And then you can practice wise vulnerability. So what does being vulnerable look like in practice? When you feel safe, when you feel you know and trust the other person, that they won't judge you or dismiss your sharing, you would feel more freer, right? You would feel safe to be more emotionally vulnerable. And you want to be more vulnerable. Why? Because you want to share your burdens. I think at the heart of every human being is we want to be understood by others. We do want to be known by others, to connect with them more by being more authentic and showing them more of your true self, because you can be your true self. So if you can be your true self, others will see your true self. So emotional vulnerability builds deeper connections as people get to hear the truth and the reality you're facing. So here's what being emotionally vulnerable can look like. You start sharing about the struggles. I think actually a really good way to start is when you start with a situation you share, and then you go into what you were doing, and you go into what you are thinking, and even deeper is what you are feeling. So start with the externals and go into the eternals. And I know that every conversation always goes deeper. It just takes a switch deeper when you start saying, I felt. Here's how I felt. I was feeling. So you might be sharing about the struggles no one knows about. It could be a secret you'd never told anyone before. It could be something quite uncomfortable that you need to say and share. It could be that it's time you be honest with that person. It could be that you need to communicate a boundary, or you need to confront someone about their behavior. Very uncomfortable things. Yeah, but then you're taking a risk, aren't you? Because you're actually getting more and more secure on the inside. You're actually building that experience that also when I share something with someone I trust, I can go a bit deeper. And then when I know that I can take those risks, I can actually take a bit more risk. So you build that. Well, actually, how much should you share and with whom? Here's some practical things to end with. This is a short teaching, yeah. So this depends on how well you know the person, right? How much do you trust them? And some people find therapists easier to talk to than their friends or family members. It's like, my therapist is a safe space. But the problem with that is you only see them once a week. So it's better that we're paying for that, right? So it's better we take what we learn in therapy about ourselves and we build it into our life and we live this out on a daily basis. So I have to say that when we share wrongly, it is because we misjudge people, because maybe we misjudge ourselves as well. Maybe we actually really needed something from them at some time. And that's perhaps why we shared with the wrong person or the person that wasn't ready. Our discernment raters could be inaccurate. We can get hurt by sharing with the wrong person. Our trust can get broken. But look, practicing this, it actually takes practice. We make mistakes. We learn from them. We get wiser. And also, on the bright side, it's a good opportunity to grow in resilience, accepting our mistakes and failures, healing our hurts, and choosing to move forward. And this all builds resilience and all builds wisdom. So I'm just going to finish here with some practical tips, which I'm sure you guys have been practicing as well. If I've never been emotionally vulnerable before, it's pretty scary. How can I start practicing this? Because, maybe in my childhood or where I'm from or with the people group I'm in, nobody opens up. It's really hard. And it's really hard to open up. So number one, just take stock of yourself. How vulnerable am I to myself? Am I looking at myself and listening to myself and doing that inner work? Or maybe do I talk nonstop and spill my guts out to anyone I talk to? Or on the other extreme, do I just talk about other people? Other people, it's them, they're to blame, and this is what they did. But I never share anything personal about myself. I'm not saying, what did I do wrong? I think I said something I shouldn't have. I was feeling this way, and that's what led me to do that, and I need to apologize. Or here's another question. Where did I learn this? Where did I learn to be quite shut down? Where did I learn to be very protective? Of course, a lot of things go back to childhood. And then why is that? Just developing self-awareness, noticing myself, and being very curious. Being very curious instead of judgmental. Number two, and this is something we sometimes don't do, is to be intentional. So thinking about, what am I going to share? Who is that person? I would like to share this. So it's being intentional with whom you share your innermost world with. And here's the truth. No one is trustworthy with everything, but everyone is trustworthy with some things. So I cannot think this person is so perfect. I will bring everything to them and they will be the only person I ever talk to, and because I will get all the answers from them. So it's just quite black and white thinking. It's, very extreme thinking. And so that's not healthy thinking. So just keep that in mind. No one is trustworthy with everything, but everyone is trustworthy with something. So a friend here is an expert here, another friend is really good with that, another friend is really, I can share this part. You don't have to share everything the same way with every person. So how well do you know them? How well can you trust them? With what can you trust them with? Is a good question. It's not everything. So number 3, you might start small, share something very small, very light, be brief with it. So imagine, say, this conversation, it's going to be this big lake in front of you. So what you want to do in this conversation, you just want to dip your toes into that lake, right? You don't go fully, I'm going to jump into the deep end, which some people do because I've normalized that way of connection. But so dip your toes in the water, and then you might just go in a little bit deeper, and then to the very deep end where it's over your head. And that takes a lot of trust building, a lot of self-awareness, a lot of time, a lot of how well do you know yourself, how well do you know that person, how that relationship is going. So you could maybe share something personal very briefly that you're comfortable to share. And then you kind of sit back and you kind of notice their reaction. Oh, are they just comfortable with how that landed? Or are they listening even? So the basic thing is, are they listening to understand, or do they just disagree? They dismiss, they judge, they start teaching you. So you notice and go, oh, I can only give so much now. I will pull back a bit. So that's how you stay wise and stay safe and take risks measurably. You measure those risks out. Also, you can ask, do they break your confidence by telling others they gossip? That's a huge red flag. Can you trust anyone who gossips? You got to tell yourself, I can't do that. So number 4, if they don't pass that test, those tests above, the little tests that you do, then maybe just pull back a bit, stick to safer, logical, non-emotional topics instead. Maybe politics. No, I'm just kidding.
Or the weather.
The weather, politics. Yes, and just slowly make those steps in. And then you start like that, you give a little test and you wait to see the changes in that person. Or you might feel like, oh, I don't know if I can trust them with all this stuff. Maybe I'll just keep it and I can share it with someone else. You don't have, as I said before, you don't have to share everything with everyone in the same way. So those are just a few tips on that. You guys might have some more tips on that. And that's how you can start practicing emotional vulnerability. What I find also is, if we are Christians, a really good way to start is with a scripture. Say, you talk about prayer, you talk about God. And what I find with speaking with Christians, we actually go deep very fast, because when we bring in God, because we're so close to him, right? And we trust him so much more than people. I don't know, that's what I find. When you bring in God, the conversation just deepens to another level altogether. There's a spiritual dimension to that you will not find with non-Christians. So if I'm speaking to a non-Christian, I never find that depth, obviously, of course, and they're not to blame because their heart hasn't opened up yet. That's not where they're at. Yeah, so we can all practice emotional vulnerability, be wise with it, and keep building those authentic, meaningful connections in your life, as you do with God. So that's it. Yeah, and I've got 3 discussion questions. Yep. So what does being emotionally vulnerable mean to you? Reflect on a time you shared vulnerably, but it wasn't reciprocated. And how do you know when you can trust someone emotionally? Yeah.